You've probably seen lots of videos about Texas online. The cheapest houses, massive ranches, all at rock bottom prices. Ha 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 ha. There are plenty of videos like that. But no one ever mentions the towns on the list in this video. Because even though the places you'll see in the video may look like tiny dots on a map, there are real stories behind each one. In one town, a wealthy man reroutes a railroad track to avenge his son, wiping out the entire town. In another, people turn on each other over billions of dollars worth of oil buried underground. In yet another, the remnants of mines abandoned years ago still pose a danger. What's more, none of these are even urban legends. In this video, I'll tell you the stories of how these 10 Texas towns were founded and why they eventually turned into ghost towns. Let's get started. 10. Sierra Blanca. Imagine driving for hours in the middle of the night on Texas's seemingly endless I-10 highway. You have no cell service, and it's pitch black all around you. You're right in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert, and when you turn your head to the right, you see a sign, Sierra Blanca. Actually, when you look it up online, on Zillow for example, you'll find plots of land here selling for next to nothing, even touted as great deals. It's a small town, but even the locals say, don't stop here. They tell you, lock your doors, hit the gas, and get out of here. Because behind the real estate agent's rosy lies, there's a lot more to the story. For example, this place is known less as a forgotten American town and more as a national dumping ground. Well, when we look online, the 2024 data lists the population as 700. You might see people saying, so the town is growing. But wait, let me explain before you believe that. That population increase isn't due to people living there. It's simply because the number of inmates in the federal prison has gone up. It all actually started in 1991 when the US banned the dumping of waste into the ocean. When New York City was flooded with sewage sludge, billion-dollar corporations stepped in and bought a massive plot of land here in Sierra Blanca, and the trains started rolling in. As you may know, the locals dubbed it the poo-poo choo-choo, or the poop train. Every day, New York's entire load of waste was transported here in 45 rail cars full of sewage. But of course, it didn't stop at just the sewage. They also wanted to bring radioactive waste from the state's nuclear reactors and bury it in this town, which is located right on an active earthquake fault line. But the people, standing united, came together and wouldn't allow it. They went on strike and won their case in court. Once the external problem started to subside, do you think the real estate agents would just sit idly by? They started selling plots of land with no infrastructure and no water in $99 installments. Hold on a minute. If any real estate agents are watching this video, please don't get mad at me. I'm just telling the truth. My cousin is a real estate agent too, so don't worry, I'm not your enemy. But that's where the real problem begins. As I mentioned, this town doesn't even have a water source. They get their water through pipes from a town 30 miles away. In fact, back in 2019, when a lawsuit broke out over water bills, the other town just shut off the valve. So it really is a strange town. If you ever find yourself here, listen to the locals. Just take a look from a distance and move on. Don't even stop. 9. Terlingua. We were in the desert at Sierra Blanca, and we saw what the highway and the town were like. If you exit I-10 and head south, toward the Mexican border, navigating Big Bend's rugged roads, you'll arrive at perhaps one of Texas's strangest towns. This is Terlingua. Unlike other towns, it isn't actually referred to as a ghost town or anything like that. It used to be, but hold on. To understand why, we'll have to go back to the early 1900s. In the 1900s, when a mercury mine opened here, thousands of people heard the news and started flocking to the area. Naturally, where there's money, people follow. Let me give you an idea of just how big this place was. In 1922, Terlingua alone supplied 40% of the United States' total mercury needs. But by the 1940s, the mine had dried up and run out. So the companies here went bankrupt. People left, and the population dropped to just 10 people. The streets and adobe houses were left completely empty. By the way, I have no idea why those 10 people are still here. Anyway, the story doesn't end there. In recent years, remote working digital nomads, artists, the wealthy, and million-dollar investors discovered this desert and said, "Let's build a hotel here." And they did. Though let's not call them hotels. They built transparent glamping domes, and a whole lot of people came. So, while nearly 70 to 80 years ago, people were losing their lives here due to mercury poisoning, now it's become a destination for the wealthy. Of course, the danger behind all this luxury hasn't completely disappeared. According to research, while the town's water supply is currently safe, there are still traces of heavy metals, including mercury, in the soil right next to the old mercury mines. So, let's say you decide to go for a walk there with your partner. You're walking along and get very close to an old mine, and the air you're breathing could, be careful, cause you trouble. So, if you ever find yourself here, though I'd say don't, just keep moving on. Of course, that's just a suggestion. If anyone's been there before, feel free to leave a comment. In the meantime, let's move on to the next town. 8. Orla. Now we're heading to Terlingua, a little further north. It's actually right in the middle of Texas. You could even call it the heart of the state. When I looked into the official maps and census data, this place struck me as a bit odd because it says between 2 and 38 people live there. But when I dug a little deeper, I realized that's just on paper. It's not actually a ghost town. Even though the records say it isn't. Because if you drive through here at midnight or look at NASA's satellite images, you'll see exactly what I mean. You'd expect that area to be pitch black, but it's almost like Los Angeles. It glows so brightly because of the industrial activity set up by oil companies here. There are massive worker camps housing thousands of workers every night, huge refineries, and drilling rigs operating non-stop 24 hours a day. These are the things lighting up the sky. And the reason this place is on our list isn't just about getting lost in the desert. This is a place that can literally slip away from under your feet and collapse at any moment. Scientific research shows that due to excessive drilling and the melting of underground salt layers, the ground in Orla and the surrounding area is either sinking or suddenly rising every year. Sometimes massive sinkholes open up right in the middle of the roads. Other times, toxic water gushes out from underground. So if you're driving through here at night, don't rely on your GPS, trust the ground beneath your feet. Furthermore, in recent years, shockwaves from massive explosions at these large facilities have shattered the windows of vehicles miles away. The sky was blanketed in pitch black smoke. As workers scrambled to find shelter, highways were closed, and the area was placed under quarantine. If you were here, would you stop and take a little stroll? 7. Helena. Now we're heading to a town that's a bit more interesting. Helena. This place is truly fascinating. We're now heading southeast on the map, toward the San Antonio area. So this really is the Wild West. This isn't actually a ghost town like the others. It's the story of a wealthy baron who wanted to take revenge on this town. Here's how it all began. Toward the end of the 1800s, Helena was a lawless town where knife duels and saloon brawls were commonplace. It was here that two men, with their left hands bound together with deer hide, fought duels with short knives. As some of you may know, these were known as the Helena duels. According to one pop culture legend, even that knife dancing scene in Michael Jackson's Beat It music video took place in this town. Anyway, it all happened on that night in 1884. Emmett, the 19-year-old son of the wealthy landowner Colonel Butler, attacked the sheriff while drunk, and the sheriff lost his life. Before the sheriff died, he shouted, "Shoot him!" and the crowd lynched the man. Upon hearing this news, Colonel Butler swore, "I will avenge my son by destroying this town with my own hands." And he actually did it. He bought the tracks leading to the train station that was supposed to come to Helena in those years, and the station was moved 7 miles further away. With no train coming, trade ceases and stores close. even the courthouse is moved, and the town truly disappears within 3 to 5 years. And today, the relatives of that man run a museum in the town. Life really is interesting. 6. Saintsbury. Now, many of you probably know this town from the movie The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you haven't seen it, you can always watch it. In fact, some people think that famous gas station is here and flock to Kingsbury. But the strangest part, the interesting part that people don't know, is that the movie wasn't filmed in Kingsbury at all, but in the town of Bastrop, exactly 40 miles away. I'm telling you this so you don't come here and waste your time looking for it. Actually, the town's own history holds its own share of horror. Frankly, it doesn't even need a horror movie. It's said that in the late 1800s, convict laborers were forced to work in the quarries here. The town's oldest surviving building was once used as a coffin warehouse, and mysterious fires are said to have occurred here. And back in 1929, the town's bank manager tried to embezzle depositors' money by investing it in fake oil wells and then pinning the blame on thieves. Although it may look like a wealthy place with vast tracts of land from the outside, nearly, and I mean this seriously, 40% of the local population lives in poverty. When you look at the streets, the old wooden churches and buildings are private property protected by strict rules. If you consider how strict Texans are about their property, and I suppose I'm included in that, wandering around here without permission could get you into trouble. So just forget about this place, folks.
5. Mentone. As we headed into the barren desert of West Texas, we arrived at the town of Mentone, one of the places we could reach according to the map. This might just be the least populous county in the United States. The sign says only 50 to 60 people live here, or at least that's what it says online. So you'd think it's a poor, impoverished place, right? But that's not the case at all. There are billions of dollars worth of oil beneath this place. Can you believe it? A town with a total population of 50 has an annual budget of $60 million. Of course, when that much money comes from just 50 people, major disputes and fights are bound to happen. Instead of making Mentone a peaceful, beautiful desert town where everyone is happy, the big families here have turned it into a place that feels like the modern West. You know, like what we see in those movies. That's what I'm talking about. Years ago, even local families were accused by some people of being property thieves or livestock thieves. Of course, whether these accusations are true or false is up for debate, but that's the reality. In other words, some outside groups have also tried to take control of the town. It's a strange place, really. So what would happen if you went to this rich place on the map, where 50 people live? Why would anyone come here? I mean, you don't get cell service, and it's unclear what the place is really like. Setting all that aside, it's not the kind of place where you can just get out of the car as a tourist and say, "Let me walk around a bit," especially in a place where so few people are fighting each other over millions of dollars, and everyone looks at you suspiciously. 4. Shafter. And we're getting close to the bottom of the list. This time, we're at the Mexican border, at the foot of the Chinati Mountains. I've never been here myself. If you've been there, please leave a comment, and I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video. Since I'm a new channel, I need your support, guys. Anyway, back in the 1800s, toward the end of that century actually, the Presidio silver mine opened here. As you know, Texas is an incredibly vast place, and nearly 90% of the silver came from here. That gives you an idea of its scale. Of course, thousands of people came here back then. Streets were built, schools were built, and stores opened. Everything was going well. So, what happened that caused such a massive silver kingdom to vanish overnight? First, the mines and tunnels were unfortunately flooded. Silver prices plummeted, and when World War II broke out, the mine shut down completely. However, the town was still standing because there was a military base nearby, and that's what kept it afloat. But when the 1940s rolled around, the military base closed. That's when the town of Shafter truly became, as you see on YouTube, the term ghost town applies perfectly here. A ghost town within just a few years. People left their homes and belongings behind. The streets, once bustling, were left completely empty. Hollywood even came here. You know how they usually set up a set to create the right atmosphere when filming movies like The Andromeda Strain? Here, they didn't even feel the need to do that. They filmed the streets exactly as they were. So what's it like today? In July 2026, that is. To be honest, it probably hasn't changed at all in the last 10 years. They say a few families still live here, of course, but even that's unclear. So if you're thinking of going there to explore, that's actually not really possible. The abandoned mine has strict rules. It's protected as private property. No trespassing signs are everywhere. In fact, let me share one last piece of information with you. Even U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia quietly passed away on a farm just a few miles from this town. Whether it's the soil or the air here, who knows? But it's an interesting place. 3. Peyote. Now we're following Highway I-20. We're in the car, coffee in hand, foot on the gas. Off we go. We've pulled over on the right or left side of the road, opened up the internet, and see that the closest town is Peyote, with a population of 70. That sounds interesting, you said, and got curious. Let me tell you about it. The thing about this place isn't the population, it's its military history, buddy. During World War II, the guys came here and built a massive airbase. In fact, when they broke ground, there were so many snakes underground that the soldiers got fed up and officially dubbed it Rattlesnake Base among themselves. Then, of course, the name caught on. Until the war ended, they kept bringing their old bomber planes here to park them. More than 2,000 massive warplanes are lined up side by side in the middle of the desert. It looks a little strange when you see it. But here's the really interesting part. Remember the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima? Well, after the war, they brought that very plane here and kept it stored for a little over 2 years. That plane, which changed the course of human history, just sat there for years under the Texas sun. Then the soldiers withdrew from here. In the 2000s, they turned it into a juvenile detention center. Then some things happened here that I can't really talk about. The administrators and such rounded everyone up. Anyway, when you look at this place from a satellite today, you can see massive concrete runways in the middle of the desert and a giant hangar standing all by itself. Don't even think about saying, "Oh, what a beautiful place, I'll go check it out." Because first of all, it's private property, and second, military engineers are warning people. Since it used to be a military zone, there's a risk of finding military munitions, so they say don't go in. That's why it's really fascinating. 2. Lobo. And now we've reached the last two on the list. This might just be, look, the weirdest town in Texas. You see, it was founded in the mid-1800s so that steam trains could take on water. It gets its name from the Mexican wolves that roamed the area back then. By the 1950s, groundwater was being drawn from the middle of the desert to irrigate cotton fields. The town suddenly came to life. It got bustling, of course. So, what happened next? 2 massive blows struck at once. First, when the train switched from steam to diesel, there was no longer a need for water. Then, so much groundwater was drawn for the cotton that the water supply began to slowly run dry. Naturally, the stores started closing down. When one of the largest earthquakes in Texas history shook the historic buildings here, the town was completely deserted by the 1990s. And just 12 years later, 3 well-known artists from Frankfurt, Germany, said, "We want to buy a town in the Texas desert," and purchased the place for just $20,000. So what was their goal? To rebuild it and sell it for a profit? No. To preserve its abandoned state exactly as it was. They turned the old gas station into an art gallery, the site of the empty pool into a campground, and for years, they organized open-air film festivals under the name Desert Dust Cinema. And 3 years ago, they put the town up for sale for $100,000. But with an agreement, meaning the buyer won't disrupt this setup. And an elderly couple bought it. I think the couple is still using the place just as it was, but since they don't let many people in, we can't see it. It's off limits, basically. 1. Toyah. And finally, we've reached the last stop. We've visited so many places on our list. Some you may know, others you may not. But we've reached the last stop, and we're on I-20. This is Toyah, a place that has experienced both Texas's rise and fall in the harshest way possible. Back in the 1900s, this wasn't just some ordinary desert town. The railroad came through, and it transformed into a massive center for cattle and logistics. The streets were packed, the hotels were full, and the banks and schools were bustling. More than 1,000 people lived here. In fact, as you may know, in 1928, When legendary female pilot Amelia Earhart's plane broke down, she made an emergency landing here and stayed for 5 days. So what happened to this town? Well, as they say, all good things must come to an end. First, the train routes changed. In 1929, major economic crises struck. Stores went out of business. But the biggest blow came when Interstate 20 was built. Since the new highway ran right past the town, bypassing Toyah, the hotels and gas stations were left without customers, and the town slowly began to fade into obscurity. Then, in 2004, a massive flood struck. Everything was covered in mud. People abandoned their homes. If you were to look now, there might be about 61 people living there. If you're thinking of going there to explore, don't go. The locals are a bit sensitive about it. I don't know why, but my research says so, and it states that they don't want anyone there except locals.
They don't want people taking photos without permission.
And that brings us to the end of our video. Don't forget to subscribe.